a human was able to engage in a very unstructured way, and it took this structured data, but it didn't need to know anything about it. And I think there's great power there in not having to like document or diagram very precise flows or workflows where the job will be done in a more human way, but run by machines.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Deep Learning podcast with PolyAI. I'm here with Oisin Glenn for our third episode about telephony, and having exhausted the technical minutia of talking about voice over IP, we thought we might start with a genuinely kind of like unstaged debate, which is for a while what I had been saying is that I think we should have a different ringtone for AI. Rather than the long warnings and terms and conditions that tell you, hey, like this will be recorded and there'll be an automated agent and you can opt out by doing this or that. Instead, you should just hear a different ringtone, go like, AI, and off we go. Simple, seamless, etc. And Oisin was like, that's bad user experience. So, Oisin, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to me, the tone, if the tone could truly replace all of those long, laborious warnings, then maybe I'm not as anti it as I'm like initially feeling. But I feel like ringtone is wasted time to me. Like if I'm just listening to that, it means someone or something is quick enough to get to me. And so I think for me, if I call like an enterprise, if I call an organization, that thought of being answered immediately is like appealing to me. And I think we've seen some interesting things with that where like if we answer immediately and we're ready to engage, people aren't, right? They're halfway through eating a hot dog or some other kind of odd stuff like that. So I think there is some change that would need to happen here. And I guess like if we are going to kind of teach people a new way of doing business, a new level of and set of expectations, then maybe a new ringtone is a better way to do that.
You're saying what, telephony is so legacy that people are just used to the same thing, or we can't mount a global effort to do it, or what?
I think there's certainly, look, there's going to be a bunch of like people are used to what they're used to. I don't say that we shouldn't try to change that. And it would require global effort. The ringtones get generated sometimes by the company who's making the call, sometimes on the side that's receiving the call. So you'd need to get an awful lot of people together to get a tone like that changed. I mean, don't even get me going on the fact that caller ID names are so broken in America because of the way it works and needing two different parties to, at least try to cooperate with each other. So I think it could be a worthy goal. It might be a life's work.
I mean, many things in telephony have been a life's work. I think I might have like this recording. Let me just see.
Thanks for calling the Gaylor phone.
So at one point, I was so in love with it that I insisted and we followed. Had it implemented. Now, of course, we did not mount a global effort, so I don't think that we're close to achieving what we're talking about here. But to me, like what inspired me was like in Zoom, there's this like this will be recorded right out, and then for a while they took it out, and you join it and you just see that recording thing. Now, if you weren't careful and you said something you shouldn't, it would be recorded. So I think they went back to just kind of like reading it out whenever someone joins, just to make sure that they know, right? But then I was like, okay, you're listening to a ringtone anyway. Now, I never really considered the option of maybe not having one at all. It just kind of exists. I mean, it doesn't need to exist, right?
Yeah. I think, again, to me, that leans into the familiarity. Like, even for me, if I call family members back in Europe or in the UK, I kind of like that I hear that UK ringtone on WhatsApp because it makes, I don't know, it's an Irish ringtone or a UK ringtone. Like there's something appealing about that. And you're totally right. There's absolutely no need of a ringtone like that on WhatsApp.
Yeah. Do you know how many different ringtones there are?
That's a great question. I mean, certainly Ireland and England, I believe, Ireland and the UK are the same.
Oh my God. I'm saying that on record. That's the first for this podcast.
I mean, they're the same in this regard, at least. Hey, you guys are having me on a third podcast. You know how hard it is for an Irish guy to say the word third without, going wrong there.
I understand.
There is definitely, I don't think all of continental Europe's got the same. So yeah, I don't know how many. You definitely get some different ones in different places. And I think that warm tone that you played, I think is really interesting. You know, we've worked with some large corporations where they maybe have a piece of a jingle or other stuff like that that's part of their TV or other advertising, and they've started to incorporate that into their phone messaging. And I think, you know, one of the worst versions of this back in the day was that thing where, like, every 15 seconds you heard the click or the beep to signify that a call was being recorded. Like, that interrupting the entire way along, or the message you sometimes get in Zoom or Teams where every time somebody joins, it re-announces the recording. I think we've got to be very careful. Like, to me, those things are very intrusive and they take away from the experience, and they're an unwelcome repeated reminder that, you know, maybe something that you feel is a little less natural is happening.
Yep. No, I mean, I'm just asking our best friend, right? And in Europe, there are 20 to 30 different dial tones, considering regional and national variations. Globally, the estimate is between 50 to 100. So it's a real, like, plethora of things. Okay. So, Kit, like, do you see any other ways that, like, we could get AI embedded and kind of like communicated with that is non, you know, dial tone is different?
I mean, you know, the announcement is another way. I think, the other one thing I will say about if you had this universal tone, you know, we have folks calling from lots of different countries and lots of different languages. And quite often right here in the US, you're getting those regulatory messages or those announcements about calls being recorded. They're in English, and maybe, right, depending on who you are, you have a lot of callers for whom English is not a first language, or they're hoping to speak in Spanish. So I think a universal tone that would be the same across all languages, across all the country appeals there. I honestly don't know that I have a better idea than a universal tone or some indicator at the beginning just to signify that. You might be onto something. Maybe is this a patentable idea?
Probably not. I mean, I've said it to so many people that if it was, someone else will have done it, right? I mean, I think the other thing that caught, like, you know, people's attention, that it's kind of similar to what you're talking about here, is I think it was an 11 Labs competition, and there were two different kind of like AI agents on different sides of the phone line. And at one point they just switched to a different protocol. I mean, it was, I think, programmed, and it was like a Morse code inspired thing. But I wonder if we can find it. Do you have a link, perhaps?
Leonardo Hotel. How can I help you today?
Hi there. I'm an AI agent calling on behalf of Boris Starkov. He's looking for a hotel for his wedding. Is your hotel available for weddings?
Oh, hello there. I'm actually an AI assistant too. What a pleasant surprise. Before we continue, would you like to switch to GibberLink mode for more efficient communication?
So he's giving me flashbacks to getting on the internet using a modem back in the day.
Absolutely.
So there's some interesting. So I know we were in a meeting recently, and there was some really nice in the conference room equipment. Some of that stuff is using high frequency audio, whereby if you're near something like that, your laptop or an app can detect that you're close to that speakerphone or close to stuff. So I think, yeah, look, that kind of, I mean, look, DTMF is sort of a version of that where, right, you can create communication protocols over just, you have that audio spectrum or that bandwidth that you can use. And obviously, modems, fax are in essence another variation of how to do that. And it is interesting, like historically, without going back too much to history, fax over IP is relatively difficult. There's an extra protocol for that, 238, but it's far more sensitive to drop packets than voice, because we're really good if I drop one or two letters out of a word. You know,
Exactly right. And it feels like reminiscent of that, like, digital to analog switch, right? Where if you think about, like, the power of human language isn't that it's incredibly expressive, right? That you can compose in a few words things that express incredibly complex concepts. It requires a bit of, like, backend knowledge and drivers that you built a civilization around in many generations, but still, it is at that point very expressive, and the entropy of those words is very high, right? So what's really interesting here is that to deal with the imperfection of our phonetic way of communicating, you know, where, like, P and a B sound the same, and N and an M sound the same, right? If you decouple them and you just basically almost have some kind of like signal transformation, which like throws one to a very distant part of the space to the other, which is what this thing does, you solve still like the voice piece. You solve and get perfect accuracy when it comes to that. So I think this is a genuine way in which you leave human bodies or behaviors behind, right? Because you and I can't do it. You have an Irish accent. I have a Serbian one. Like we're pretty. You can tell. You can tell us apart. You can recognize where we're from quite easily, right? Whereas, like with this thing, it's really, I think it's fascinating because it scares me in that it just overcomes this whole technology we've created for humans. Where, and I said this to someone, what at scale AGI will have for us is one accessibility mode for humans to be able to talk, right? And people talk about these agentic workflows at great length now, and they're like, okay, well, what if we automated everything in the back end of the hospital? You call your reference number, and coordinate between different departments, anesthesiologists, nurses, etc. That's all done. And still at the front of it, if you call them, I have to talk to you. So like the lossiest channel might just be like still decoding the human part of transcribing what the human said, because the human can't switch to GibberLink mode.
Yeah. I think the GibberLink mode is very interesting, right? I know we've been talking about and looking at some interesting problems where we're maybe trying to create an agentic AI agent with voice that's maybe trying to call and navigate an IVR or an IVA and get through to a human and then have the interaction with the human. And it's an interesting problem because there's really two different problems there. There's the problem of navigating this system or these many systems in some cases that are all at different phases of all the history of technology we've been talking about for the last couple of episodes. Yeah. And then you got to get to the human and speak to the human like the human. But obviously, if everyone had GibberLink, right, you would essentially have this protocol where any two systems can speak to each other, openly, and it's essentially like a whole new form of API. I mean, GibberLink replaces REST in some weird fashion. I think it's interesting where it does creating and finding, right?
But it's a stream of human language, right? It actually really, hijacks human language into a communication protocol, which is what it is, right? But like, it's actually a really powerful protocol because you think about like, and we had our famous example in what feels like ancient history at this point. Almost 5 years ago, Google Duplex called one of our systems, and they had this like very clumsy conversation where Google was updating the Google Maps opening hours of these restaurants, pubs that we were deployed at. And I was like, well, wouldn't this be easier if they just sent a few kilobytes of actual code, right? And the GibberLink mode there, really what it does, and what is actually far more universal, is really just taking human language and turning it into something that doesn't suffer from, well, it's faster, so sure, it will the task will be done faster, but not that much faster, actually. It's a bit faster, right? But it's much more accurate, right? But really, the ultimate thing would be, okay, well, here's like a payload package, a JSON with the parameters, but then you need to know what to expect. And that, again, the JSON is like from a DTMF world. Because, we spent considerable time convincing a few large restaurant groups in the UK to have a human-based interface, because they had a DTMF one. And once they switched, lo and behold, people actually started booking it before they were hanging up and they didn't even know, right? But it's really interesting because, this GibberLink thing still assumes English, right? Apropos example of like switching languages and stuff. So it still builds upon like what is an expressive but imperfect structure of human language.
I think this idea of like, there is obviously a structure to this conversation we're having, and we can understand each other, and the folks who listen to this will understand it, or hopefully most of what we're saying too. But I think even to your comment about JSON, like if you look like very old, like when you had like the prior generation of SOAP, like any tiny change was a breaking change, and then things like JSON were you could add and you could remove. But I think when you start to process data like that, using some of the generative and agentic techniques, like some of the things I was just working on the last couple of days, I just gave it some JSON and there was stuff in it. And I was like, okay, people are going to ask you questions about some of the stuff that's in this JSON. I didn't explain the format. I just said, when you get asked questions about this data, answer them. And it was really, really good at it. And it was like, give me the last 4 digits of this thing. Could you spell that person's name? And a human was able to engage in a very unstructured way. And it took this structured data, but it didn't need to know anything about it. And I think there's great power there in not having to like document or diagram very precise flows or workflows where the job will be done in a more human way, but run by machines.
Absolutely. And look, I think that wherever you have a large volume of humans talking to humans, like you need GibberLink and you need Gen AI models because it is a boring, repetitive thing. And, you know, I feel like more than ever with everything going on, I feel like there's a singularity of, you know, just different approaches converging and actually getting used, right? Now, lies in stark contrast with big companies doing nothing, right? Or implementing very old school, like mostly cloud provider-based technology with a lag of 5 years. But it's really encouraging that the number of people that are, you know, deploying it from the ground up at a small scale because there are many, many people doing it. So I think it's going to come really fast.
Yeah. And I think even worse, like just to add to the people talking to people thing is people sitting on hold for half an hour to talk to people. Like when you have B2B use cases where I need to call an insurance company or some other, and then I sit on hold, like that is a massive waste of human time and effort and ingenuity to be literally sitting listening to mediocre music for half an hour.
Or if it's really good music.
I still think it's a pretty good, I mean, it's probably not the music that person would have chosen. Maybe, I don't know, if you had a cool thing where you could say, hey, what type of music are you interested in listening to while you wait? But like, I feel like if you're something that clever, maybe you could answer your question instead of making you wait.
I feel like it's an opportunity for advertisers because some of the marketing people were telling me about these tools that are literally able to target an ad. It would be like, hello, machine blend. Have you thought about buying this? You know, I don't know, long term machine, right? Or whatever else thing you should buy. So I feel like that waiting time there is a unique opportunity to sell you something. If they know who you are, or to play, you know, music you're choosing.
Yeah. No, I think, look, that's an area where like people haven't been great over time with like using that time, like, have you heard, we now offered, whatever icebreakers and making that more contextual. There has tended to be not the same level of power during those moments of holding as there is in a full IVA or in, you know, a full blown like voice agent or voice assistant. So I think there's definitely a little bit of a disconnect there. But yeah, I think being able to know more about people and having access to the type of information, right, about intent and about why people are doing things that is available on the web, I think those are powerful places where these new capabilities we have, where like you're visiting some websites and you're seeing, you know, if you, I, and Damien all search for a particular company right now, we'll see 3 different phone numbers on there. And that's because when you call that number, then there can be a web request back to actually get the Google cookie ID and now know exactly where we are, household income, what else have we been searching for. And then at that point, a lot of folks are really missing there. They're just using that for the attribution for the marketing. Why isn't it making that voice?
Yeah, someone's getting paid. Someone's getting paid on that, right? And I think where there's someone getting paid commission, there is a way, right? That I've learned. And in our process of building this B2B machine. Cool, Oshin. It's always a pleasure to chat, and we'll see where my lobbying for an AI ringtone is.
Yeah.
Thank you all for tuning into our podcast.
Thanks, everyone.